Okay, so let's first talk about your experience just as an individual.
Okay.
What got you into policing?
Well, what really got me into policing was the show Cops, because I actually majored in economics, and when I graduated, I was an accountant for 3 years, in accounting for 3 years. And one day I was looking through the paper, and I saw that the show Cops was hiring, and I remember thinking like, the show, like I liked the show, so I wonder if it was like the show, and so I just applied, and that's kind of what got me into policing. I never expected to be here this long. I really thought that it was like any other job. You'll just go there. If you didn't like it, you'll roll out. And about a year into it is when I realized this is where I wanted to be and this is where I wanted to stay.
What, I guess, made you want to stay? Is there anything in particular that stuck out for you?
Yes, when I first got hired here in '96, in '97 I was actually assigned to the public housing communities or projects. And once I was in those communities, I started to realize that the way the children looked at not just the police, but like the people in that area, they saw really only two groups of people in their minds that had money. It was drug dealers and police, because it was such a limited, such an isolated community, and so I noticed that they were picking one or the other, but when it came to the police were kind of like the enemy, and so because the police would come in, take away whoever, whether it's mom, dad, cousin, brother, friend, or just a person that lives out there, and I was like, you know what, this is an opportunity to be an example to people because I'm from Harrisburg, so be an example to these individuals, realize that the police is just a job. You know what I mean? It's not who you are. You make the job. The job shouldn't make you.
And you kind of told me that most minorities don't necessarily see themselves in these positions.
Yes, and I'll go back to my own experience. Like I said, I majored in economics. I went to Penn State. My senior year at Penn State, I never forget it. There was a individual, a black guy that was a friend of mine that had graduated a year before. We weren't close friends, but I knew him from college. He had came back when I was a senior just to kind of visit. And when he was there, I was like, "Hey, how you been? What you doing?" And he was just like, "Oh, I work for Philadelphia Police." And I remember thinking right then and there, well, how can you be a police officer? Like, you're black. I didn't say it to him, but that was my thought process. And because at the time I only saw the police as white, like white males. And so I never wanted to be a police officer. That stuck with me. Obviously, 3, 4 years later, I ended up being a police officer. But I understood that, like, you know, if you if you really don't see yourself in something, you won't put in for it. Kind of like the election. We just had an election cycle or period or whatever. Um, if I don't live in Harrisburg, let's say I live in, I don't know, let's say Mechanicsburg, I'm not going to really follow what's going on in Harrisburg. That's irrelevant to me. I have no interest in that. It doesn't apply to me. I'm only going to follow what happens in my jurisdiction. It's kind of the same thing. If you can't see yourself as something, why would you even look into it? If that makes any sense.
It does. Um, and so I guess considering your own experience,
Hmm.
you felt these feelings, transitioning to the now. What would it then take for other individuals to see themselves in these roles?
Well, first thing, one of the things, I shouldn't say first, there's a couple of things, and I think they're all pretty much just as important. But one of the things is you're going to need people that resemble you, whether you're black, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're Asian or white, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the race. You want to see people that resemble you because then you feel you qualify for that position. Um, so you need to have more, in this case, you would need to have more minorities just in the field itself. Another thing is just kind of being kind of like introduced to this and understanding what this is all about. I mean, because these days, policing is really what you see on social media or on just like regular media, on the news and stuff like that. It's kind of what you see, and people don't really understand what the job really is. It kind of like we're not really human beings. We're kind of like these machines, and we just do these things, and you can't have a normal conversation. It's I didn't do it. When you walk up to them, I didn't do it, or arrest me, or don't arrest me. But maybe I want to talk to you about the Eagles. About the best football team in the NFL. But they have to be able to see themselves. They have to be introduced to it, and also. Even on the administration side, on the police side, we have to be able to open our minds up and start to look at things a little different as well, and start to understand that times have changed. And so, not saying that people are doing things wrong, but sometimes you got to do things different. So
I guess what is Harrisburg Police Department more so focused on now to kind of bridge that gap for people in terms of recruitment?
Well, one of the things we're doing, and like I said, as you know, I'm the captain of the Community Services Division. One of the things that the mayor actually has introduced, brought into this, was the community service aides. That's a new thing that's coming out. They're civilian employees that work with pretty much hand in hand with the police department. And in that position, one of the things that we're kind of was focusing on is not saying you had to be a city resident, but we're getting a lot of city resident applicants, and a lot of people of color are applying, whether they're Hispanic, Black, it doesn't matter. We're getting, and white. I mean, it's all colors that are applying, and with that, that's that introduction piece that we talked about, because now you're working so closely with the police department and the community. You start to see, and now you can start to, not only for yourself as a citizen, you can actually talk to some of the other people who maybe don't want to talk to the police, and maybe you can start to bridge that gap. And also, it allows, one of the things we're looking into is taking that and utilizing that position to give you extra points on the test if you decide to become a police officer. So it's also a stepping stone as well. We also started reaching out to, obviously, not just your recruitment places and stuff like that, but some of the Black colleges and just the colleges and the schools, and trying to get in, and not so much a drive of, become a police officer. Our recruitment is trying to move even further back, trying to go into the schools early and make that introduction, so you'll understand who we are, who you can do this job if you choose to. Those are just some of the things. And one of the things the commissioner says, and he was actually right, is that if you want to recruit minorities, you have to recruit their parents. And so, getting into some of these things, speaking at the churches, I'm going to speak at a church on Sunday. Those are the parents. You're getting to talk to them, and you're getting to understand that, hey, listen, I'm just like you. I grew up in the same neighborhoods. I'm no better than you. Just this is my job. Your son, your daughter, you, anyone, give them an opportunity to do something different. So, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And going back to the test, from what I can understand in the process, people who do not pass the test, most departments are not aware of those applicants. Is that correct?
If you don't pass the test, this is the way ours works. If you don't pass the test, then you're not even, you can't even apply, because you don't apply until after the test. What you're applying to is the test. You're applying to what's called, right now we're involved in a consortium, and that's a group of different agencies all coming together to do one test. So really what you're applying to is to do that. I'm applying to take this test. If I pass this test, then I can apply to these individual departments.
Is it extremely difficult? Just not necessarily in our conversations, but in other stories, I've heard other people reference the test is why some people are not successful in completing to the, application portion.
And what people are you referring to?
I've just seen other stations do this story, and some officers allude to the fact that Black people can't pass this test.
Well, you probably can tell I'm Black. And I passed the test. You know, I got a 97 on the test. So I'm not going to sit here and say black people can't pass the test. No, that's not true. I go to the testing portion. Prior to the testing portion, you have a physical agility. The test is broken down into two portions. You have physical and a written. Even at the physical, when you're at the test, you're only maybe 1% of the people are of color that are actually taking this test. Maybe as high as 5% at times, but it's not even, you're not even getting large numbers. You understand what I mean? So to sit here and say, and I've heard it too, to sit here and say, you know, black people are having problems passing the test, I personally don't agree with that. I haven't done any statistics or anything, but I'm black, I passed the test. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yes. It's not a test that's like.
Is it the ACT, the SAT?
No, it ain't that. It's not getting into law or anything.
I'm
like it's.
What's on this test?
It's really just a comprehensive test, comprehension test, and there's some just. You either know it or you don't. Like, you don't need to know about police work to take the test and pass it. So.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to add that I did not cover?
Well, basically, like, we need to, as a community, we need to really start talking to each other and understand that, like, this is an opportunity. If you want to make a difference, I know the big thing is defund the police, defund the police. Okay, let's say you do defund the police. Let's say you do, which I obviously I don't agree with that. So let's say you do. But if you still aren't at the table, what's it going to matter? Like, you're still not a decision maker. So if you want to be a part of this, apply. Get in there. Stop just talking bad about the police. Be a part of it. Be a part of the change. Do something. Put yourself in a position. And I'll go back to me. And I know I talked about my first year and how I looked at things. I never forget my first year there. You know, even though I'm from the city, I never really experienced what I experienced as a police officer. So that first year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay here. I want to make a difference. And one of the things back then in 1997 was I wanted to become a lieutenant on 3rd Platoon, because at that time I saw 3rd Platoon was the busiest platoon, and they had the most contact with the citizens. And I wanted to be able to make a difference in not just the community, but in the police as well, and say, hey, listen, we need to make sure we interact with people a certain way. And the lieutenant at that time was the person that had that power to make that happen. So, like, if you want to make a difference, you got to make a difference. You got to apply. You got to come out here. Don't think because you're black or you're Hispanic or you're a person of color, don't think that you're not going to pass this test, and don't think that you can't do this job, because you absolutely can. And matter of fact, we absolutely need you. So whether you're a parent, if you're watching this, if this is on make the cut or not, whether you're a parent, whether you're an aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, son, daughter, brother, sister, encourage the next person. If you want to make a difference, if you're sitting there and you don't like what you see on TV when it comes to policing, if you want to make a difference, apply for the police department. If you like what you see on TV, if you don't agree with what you see, and you're like, well, they're overacting, the police do a really good job, you apply as well. So for me, if you want to be here, if you want to make a difference, apply. That's how I feel about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So much.